Welcome to the Strong Enough Podcast, your relationship wellness podcast. I'm your host, Claudia. Today's guest is going to share with us how an abusive relationship left her in constant fear and then filled with guilt and shame. She was able to overcome that by taking back her own power and is now a successful coach. Please help me in welcoming Kathryn Malek. Kathryn, thank you so much for joining me here today. I so appreciate you being willing to talk about your story, your triumphs, and where you've come from and where you are now. So how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Claudia. This is going to be fun. I just love talking to you. And I just know because, hearing your story and about you, there's just so much that we can share with the world. And, it's these nuggets of knowledge. You don't know who is listening and who is taking that to heart and who you're helping.
I absolutely agree. And I know we really shared that connection from the start, when we did get to know one another and kind of realize those similarities in our stories. The audience knows a little bit about my story, so they might see where we're going here today. But before we go there, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a soul coach. Which basically means that I'm a spiritual coach. So I'm an international best-selling author. I'm a second Reiki master healer. I'm also the spiritual coach and healer. So combining all of those abilities, I actually coach and guide empathic souls. So empaths and people who identify as HSP, which is highly sensitive people. So helping them with their abilities and just acclimating that to life. Often empaths and HSP struggle a lot in this world, being overly sensitive, feeling and sensing so deeply. And then all the other parts of life that just as human beings we struggle with. So bringing in some of that life and experience and that coaching into that.
I think that's so interesting because I think I used to be one of those highly sensitive people in a lot of ways. And, being a police officer, I had to really draw that back and kind of dissociate from a lot of things. So is your ability to teach and work with these people because you identify as highly sensitive yourself?
Absolutely. I'm an empath. 150, 200%. Absolutely. And the thing about it is that I didn't even know that I was an empath. I always knew something was up. I knew it because I knew things, I sensed things, and I always say this one. It reminds me of the Sesame Street. I think it's Sesame Street song that one of these things is not like the others.
Yes.
And that's what I felt like growing up. I felt like, the way I could sense into things and know things and hear things that, oh, wait a minute, everyone else isn't like that. And so it took quite a few years, and it finally came down to me discovering a word called empath and finding out what that meant. And I was like, oh, okay, that explains everything. And I feel that many empaths and HSPs, once they find the word and find people that are just like them, it's a huge relief.
So
often you feel crazy before that.
Right. Absolutely. Because you think you're out there all by yourself and you're different from everybody. Like you said, which one of these is not like the other? So for those people who haven't heard that word yet and who might now know that they're an empath too, can you give the viewers just a quick down and dirty empath description and tell people who they might really be?
Sure, absolutely. So as I was saying, empaths sense and feel deeply. So everything is almost overwhelming at times. Things that the average person might find completely natural are intense for someone who is empathic. And so an empath is also known as someone who can take on other people's energies and emotions. And the word can, because, an empath who is in tune with their abilities and has been trained, they'll know that this is me, that's them, not to be doing that. And so it can be really exhausting and confusing, because if you're an empath and you're suddenly, feeling one emotion, and then you go to this cocktail party, let's say, and suddenly you've just completely switched. Now that person who's, switched with you, they're probably feeling great now. And you've got this maybe heavy emotion now that you're carrying, and you're suddenly wondering why you feel angry or sad. So empaths have that extra little bit of, they want to help people. They're very kind-hearted, always wanting to help and rescue and save everyone around them. This is the person that everyone goes to and tells their problems to. If you are that person and people come to you and tell you their life story, and they feel so safe, and they just, wow, they've never told anyone this before, but with you, they feel safe. That's a sign of an empath. People will find you for that. As well, sensitive to maybe scents and noises. Going into a mall would be like nails on a chalkboard, usually. The energy of like a large shopping mall, and all the people and the energy of what's going on. So those are some of the things for empaths.
I did really relate to one thing you said, because I am that person that random people will tell their deepest, darkest secrets, and it's very uncomfortable. I literally have been in line at the grocery store before, and a stranger has, tapped me on the shoulder and told me about their illicit affair. So I am that person that people want to talk to. So maybe I do relate to that a little more than I thought I did. What I think was really interesting too is you talked about wanting to make other people happy, wanting to save people. It sounds like you're really talking about what, we would commonly refer to potentially as a people pleaser. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. Empaths are completely that. And it's not, I don't say this in a way to blame or shame anyone who's an empath. It's just naturally who they are. They're already naturally sensitive. Many will come into traumatic experiences in childhood. So it deepens that sensitivity. And so, I think of it as a sort of like a survival strategy, a way to go through life. So learning to navigate that from a young age. And for many, it's something that they've used throughout their whole lives, not knowing what it was, not knowing that they're doing it, until it gets to, the point of empaths often feel exhausted. They burn themselves out a lot because they're always going, always worrying about everyone else. And at some point, it will click in. After many, many years, usually it clicks in that something is not right here. Like, this has to stop. And so discovering, about being a people pleaser, not having boundaries, and codependency in relationships.
So you went to the place where I kind of wanted to go as well, with codependency, lack of boundaries. It sounds like this type of individual might be more susceptible to engaging in an unhealthy relationship. Would you agree with that?
Pretty much, yeah, because with their big hearts, empaths and HSPs generally like to see the good in everyone. They want to stay in the positive. So even if someone does things that maybe aren't in alignment and maybe aren't on the up and up, empaths will tend to look the other way, and say, oh, well, maybe they're just having a bad day. They'll excuse it. The things that are red flags, they'll push them away until they know that that's what they're dealing with, and these are the things that you need to pay attention to.
Would you say it would be harder or more difficult for an empath to remove themselves from an unhealthy relationship, perhaps because they take a little longer to make excuses for somebody, they push away those red flags, they they think that things are going to get better, or they do really focus on the good times?
I think it can be really difficult for an empath because for the most part, empaths are working from a place of big hearts, lots of love, but that love is for everyone else and not for themselves. So when we look at an empath, and usually in the area of self-worth, self-love, it's often non-existent. They don't really know that that's a thing. And that can go for many people in the world, whether you're an empath or not. Some people really don't know about this. They were never taught. They never experienced that. And so it can be really difficult. When we look at a relationship that someone's in, and especially with someone who's abusive, it's so easily to get caught in that trauma bonding. And I think that's a slippery slope, and it's very, very difficult for someone to pull themselves out, because not only are they physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually exhausted and drained and beaten up, and they could be physically, but I mean, beaten up, their spirit is beaten up. So to try to even do anything, it's very difficult.
And I know that you are talking from a place of experience. You yourself have gone through an unhealthy relationship. And I would really appreciate if you would talk a little bit about how that relationship started and at what point you realized it wasn't good for you.
Yeah, this is a big one. Yeah. So, I will start with saying I did have an awareness of narcissists, but the ones that I had met and been in like beginnings of relationships with, like I'm talking for a month or two, and then just thinking they're nuts, and I was very strong with like, get away and blocking them. Right now, then the universe brings in the big guns. Oh, she thinks she knows. So this person that I met, of course, was charming. This is a big one. And not because people are charming, it makes them a narcissist, but it's one of the telltale signs. If you get that flag, maybe, keep an eye on that. And a narcissist right away will begin with something called love bombing. So they're complimenting you over and over and over, and they've just met you. So already they're crossing a boundary because they want to get in and be your BFF. So they're crossing without you even knowing and stepping into that role so that they can be, this person that you believe and you trust and you love like much quicker than anyone else. And they're working on it. And the comments that they're doing, the compliments, if one is listening, they're not compliments, they're flattery. And as the narcissist is complimenting, there'll be things like, it could be like, oh, I like your dress. Oh, I like this. But then they start complimenting ways of being. They might say, well, my ex was like this, but you're not like that. You're easygoing and you never complain. You don't make a fuss. That's the grooming. So we've gone from love bombing to like including the grooming of you, training you how you're going to be. And it's interesting. So in my story, that's exactly, love bombing, grooming. And at first with some of the love bombing, I definitely felt a bit of a flag because it was like, this isn't real. But then I was like, I threw it away. I went, oh, actually this person is real. Like they seem like they're really trying. And narcissists will also present often as victims. So it's like a country song. Everyone done them wrong. And they'll tell you stories about everyone who's done all these bad things to them. And especially if you're a kind heart, you really feel sorry for them. So you definitely now really don't want to step on their toes or cause any upset because, oh, this person's been through so much. And what's interesting about that, if one were to fact check, let's say the narcissist said, oh, well, my ex stole my car and she crashed it and all this happened. And if you actually were able to fact check, you'd find out it was the narcissist himself who stole their ex's car and probably smashed it, but they'll just flip that story around. Little details missing out that it was not really them, it was someone else. But it's a good story and it draws people in, so why not use it? So that is exactly hearing all sorts of stories, all of the sort of bad things that have happened. So really wanting to see the good for this person. And then, just like a typical narcissist, once they feel that you're hooked, they feel like they have your loyalty, watch out. We've got Jekyll and Hyde happening. So in my case, it was a few insults, just being thrown my way. Like, it's not, when I look back now, it's not something a balanced human being would say, perhaps. It would be little comments of, if something what needed fixing, a light bulb needed changing in my home or anything, it'd be like, oh, well, I guess your past boyfriends didn't like you very much. They didn't fix anything. Like weird comments. It's like, where is that coming from? And shrugging off. Whereas now, of course, looking back, that's a bit of a red flag. Because if this is someone in your life, why are they saying stuff like that? I mean, it's not appropriate. And there's something obviously up. So this is a point not to let it slide, this red flag. So in my case, all of this was happening. And for me, I was trying to navigate it. I'm one of these people that can really try to figure things out. Let's talk it out. Let's figure it out. With a narcissist, no. No. It's not worth the time and the energy. Now, for me, what it came down to, the real sort of first sort of red, huge flag that I saw was we were at an event, and near the end of the event, we were both speaking to one of the speakers at the event. And then he leaves the event. I'm still speaking to the person who was speaking at the event. And I thought, I wonder where he went. And I'm looking through the building. I don't see him. So I head outside, and he's outside. And he's on the phone. So I think everything's okay. I thought, oh, he just needed some fresh air. Well, as I walk towards him, rage, another thing narcissists do, the rage just went off. And I was like, what is going on? And it immediately became that obviously I want to date this other person because I was speaking to him, which is insane, really. When I think of that now, it's so here I am thinking, okay, you need to calm down. We'll talk. I don't know why you're all of a sudden upset, but I remember in that moment thinking, I looked at his car and I looked up the street and I thought, I can make a run for it. There's a taxi I could grab. And then I thought, well, no, he's already this edgy type of person that gets upset already easy. So that's just going to make it worse. So, okay, I'll go in the car. Let's hope for the best. So I get in the car and we drive towards the waterfront. No rhyme or reason. And I'm thinking, I hope everything's going to be okay. I hope there's people around here in case I need anyone. And as we get to the waterfront, he gets out and I get out and I'm cautiously looking like for exits and places where I can dart to if I need. And he's still yelling. He's been yelling the whole time. And then he's saying, I should throw you in the lake. And inside, I'm like, yeah, I think you will. So I'm stepping back a little bit to make sure. No, he doesn't, but he's ranting and raving about it. So after that, there was still lots of yelling for the coming days. And at that point, I spoke to one close friend and I said, I think he's nuts. She goes, oh, no. Like, when a guy's really jealous like that, it means he really likes you. I'm like, I don't think so. But I'll give him a chance. And so, of course, a narcissist will turn around and apologize. So he did. But it was interesting because I was sort of 1 foot out. Like I just didn't feel, I thought, really? So as time went on, it was more Jekyll and Hyde. A lot of insults, a lot of rage going. And I was becoming really exhausted. It's just draining being around someone like that. And they're constantly around me. And then I wanted to get them out of my life. So now it's been, maybe 4 or 5 months. I wanted to get this person out of my life. So I decide for safety reasons to meet them in a public space to have this talk. I had a bunch of friends waiting that I could text, call in a moment's notice if they needed to come get me, anything. So I thought in a public space, he's not going to start yelling and, maybe this will be okay. So I let him know. I said, listen, this isn't working for me. It's time I move on. He kind of, okay, I get it. Then I go to leave and he's like chasing after me down the street and yelling. And so luckily I could flag a taxi and I got away. But of course, over the coming days, he wanted to speak again. And I thought, okay, I don't know how I'm going to get away. Like I could tell already this was a problem. Like this person, like I could see it in their eyes sometimes, that dangerous look. It's like they would slip into a different persona. And I knew it wasn't safe. And so for me, I just thought, okay, well, I'll just try to avoid them until I figure out what I can do. And at that time, what started happening was a lot of accusations, a lot of making plans with me, but then canceling or not showing up, but then yelling at me because it's my fault, which of course didn't send me off in a wrong direction, because anytime if he had to cancel anything, I would just carry on with someone else. Like one of my girlfriends, I'd be like, okay, let's go out and do something. So it wasn't working. What he was trying to do wasn't working. However, what soon started happening was he started showing up everywhere I was unannounced. That was the tricky one because I didn't know, is he following me? What's going on? I know now. I realized that he had been tracking my phone. I realized what was going on. I just didn't know at the time. So there was a lot of showing up wherever I was, showing up at my home. And it was really unnerving, creepy, and scary. So at this point, I don't even know what I'm going to do. I'm now really getting scared and I want this person out of my life. And so I called the same friend, the one who said, well, people are jealous. And I told her, I said, listen, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I was in tears and I was like, I need help or something. And she said, well, listen, my daughter takes ballet class. One of the dads is a detective. I'm going to speak to him at ballet class today, and I'm going to get you his number, and you need to talk to him. So, yay. So, for me, that was big. So I did call him the very next morning, just wondering, should I be worried? Is there something wrong? Or am I just worrying too much and it's nothing? And he reassured me that this is the problem. The stalking of me and everything that's going on. And there was just more incidences that I shared with him. And he was like, no, I really think you should go report this. I think for your own safety, you need to go in and report. And I'm like, okay, so this is on a Saturday and we're in the middle of a snowstorm. So I think, okay, you know what? I'll go tomorrow or the next day when it's not such a wild weather outside. So the very next day, and I'm kind of trying to hide out, and I keep I had a feeling my phone might be tracked. I wasn't sure. I didn't know how or what. So I kept trying to turn my phone off and, just try to, not go out too much. The very next day, though, my friends wanted to go to something, to visit an exhibit downtown. I thought, okay, well, I'm with them. It should be okay. So I went with them. And as we're walking around this big convention, I keep darting around looking for the security guards, looking behind me, looking in front of me, looking around, because I'm just waiting for it. And I thought, I was just petrified, waiting to see what's going to happen. Well, we made it through the morning and nothing happened. And I thought, okay, great. And then, of course, it's still quite snowy out. So my friends go to drop me off. And I said, oh, that's fine. You can drop me off at the store and I'll walk from there. So I did that. And of course, the minute I walk from that store and I get to my street, this car pulls up and the window rolls down. It's like, hey. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I quickly called a friend who had just, seen me minutes before. And I said, listen, you have to come get me. In the meantime, he parks his car and then starts chasing me. So I'm like running through the neighborhood. I mean, it's a snowstorm, so people aren't really out, but I'm like kind of looking and seeing, like, could I run through someone's yard? Like, where can I get to? And there's not really, a clear path. So I'm running one way and then turning around and trying to run the other way. And then up to my house. And by the time I got to my house, I was trying to walk up the icy stairs, and he grabbed me and pulled me back. And what I didn't realize in that moment, which I soon found out because he yelled quite loudly for quite a while, and then he left. I thought, that's interesting. He just left. 5 minutes later, my friend pulls up, and all of a sudden I'm like, where's my phone? Phone is gone. Now, for this narcissist, I know it was, look, I have your phone. You have to come to me. I own you. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're not making my day fun, but now I'm going to the police. So that's when I went in and, had an interview, talked to them, and they said, we'll speak to him. We'll ask him about the phone, but there was really nothing because, of course, no, I don't have the phone. Oh, no. So there's nothing we could do. But, due to technology today, you just go in and everything's on the cloud and they just get your new phone and you're all set up. So that plan didn't really work of trying to have power over me with my phone. Now, what did happen, though, is that he was spoken to, and that didn't really do very much. Over the coming weeks, for some reason, I was still being followed. And whether I would be in a bank or out in a store or anything, he would show up and start screaming at the top of his lungs, calling me every name in the book. Now, at this point, I wasn't going anywhere alone. I was being escorted by my male friends everywhere. I literally, if I had to go to the store, I'd be calling a friend and say, I'm not going alone, you're going with me, which I think was the wisest thing at that time. I knew that this person was not okay. So this happened quite a few times. So I called back to the person who was handling my case and explained the different eruptions that are happening and how I'm walking. Everywhere I go, I'm looking over my shoulder. And so they said, well, we think you need to get a restraining order. I'm like, oh, okay. How do I do that? I'm like, I don't know. So I'm like on Google, checking.
Right.
Now, the thing is, I did go down to the family courthouse looking into it, but there's certain criteria that you need to follow. And if you're not married or common law or share children, there's nothing they can do. So luckily, the beautiful person I spoke to, because at that point when I was there, throughout most of this, I'd pretty much held my ground, holding it together. This one, the minute she said, well, you can't get a restraining order, you don't fit the criteria, I started crying and I didn't stop. Like, I just couldn't. I just thought, like, how can I live my life in terror like this? And it's not fair. And so, the poor woman, eventually she's like, hold on, I'm going to go get some Kleenex. And I'm like, thank you. Now, what she did do was she called over to another courthouse and said, what you're going to need to do is you need to get a peace bond. I called over, they're expecting you, go over there, you're going to need to apply. And she talked me through the whole thing. So from that point on, things got a little bit better. Of course, there were a few instances where this person was, still finding me in public and screaming and yelling. And every time this would happen, now we're getting places and businesses are like yelling at him saying, you need to stop this, sir. Otherwise we're calling the cops. So, they're looking at me and they're like, don't ever come back here to him. And so there's people that are picking up on this. So it went on for a little while more until we started going to court. And then once that came in, I think that really helped. I've seen the person since then, and they've walked past me peacefully. But I don't think now they will ever come at me. That yelling, that screaming will happen at this point. And, as far as I know, I feel pretty safe now. Of course, all the locks in my homes have been changed. security cameras,
Mm-hmm.
you name it. I did everything that I was taught to do. So
thank you, first off, for sharing. That was really a tough story to listen to. I know for me, and I'm sure for other people. And I want to talk about your experience and since then, but I want to highlight a couple things that you mentioned that are great. First off, you spoke with your friend who said, no, jealousy, equals love, whatever. That part wasn't great. What was great was that you trusted your intuition, even though you confided in your friend and your friend said that, and we're not knocking this friend, because everybody doesn't know, what that really means. But what I really appreciate is that you trusted your gut and you said, okay, this is what she told me, but no, that just doesn't make sense. The other thing that I think was so amazing, and you mentioned it throughout your story, was the safety measures that you took. And I really want people to key in on that and think about some of the things that you said, from the point of looking around for people, to looking at where exits were, to stepping back away to try to, distance yourself from this individual, to being escorted by friends when you didn't feel safe, to changing your locks and, trying to turn off your cell phone, and all these little things that really probably helped save your life in some of these instances that you were in. So I want people to know that there's a ton of things you can do to try to keep yourself safe, because from your own admission, and it is unfortunate at times, sometimes things have to go farther than we want them to go, or that they should go, before police can get involved and before they can actually do anything. But when you began to feel unsafe, you did reach out to them and were able to take these additional safety measures. So I just wanted to take a minute for people to really hear those things and understand that all those little things contributed to you still being here today. So thank you for pointing out those different things, first and foremost. It sounds like you really, you didn't live in this relationship for years and struggle with what was going on. What do you attribute to that, as far as, was there something in your upbringing? Was it just that you're really in tune with yourself? What do you think gave you that immediate understanding and strength to say, nope, I'm not in this. This is not healthy, and I've got to get out?
Well, yeah, it's a few things. I think, naturally just who I am, but you're right. What I experienced growing up, my mother passed away when I was a child. So I was raised by my father and my 4 brothers, and I was the woman of the house at a young age. Mm-hmm. And there's just something that I have that I've always had. And I know my father, when he was alive, he noticed this about me. And many people when I was in the arts would notice this. And it's something that quite a few empaths will have. Whether they act on it or not, or whether they listen to it, is another thing. For me, it's I can see through lies. And I call it my BS meter, my bullshit meter. Mm-hmm. And I see it. Nothing gets past me. Like, I may not call someone out on it. I could be in a store and there's someone being very salesy with me, like used car salesman. Mm-hmm. And I may not say anything, but I'm like, oh dear. Right. This is awful. I see right through it. Right. So I think that, and I have a lot of stubbornness in me, a lot of wanting to stand up. And what was interesting in this situation, although it wasn't for years, the damage was just as if it had been years. That's the one thing, the damage from coming out of something like this, like my sense of power was like in the ground. There was nothing, my sense of self and my fear was running my life at that point. Like for many months, my friends noticed, of course, they're waiting, they're holding their breath, hoping that she'll smile again. But I know at that point, like I was just trying to get through it, and knowing that I would need to reach out and get help from healers and coaches and people to coach me through this so that I could regain my power. Now, what really helped, of course, honestly, was going to court, standing up for myself. And of course, all my friends joined me too. I had an entourage. I have to admit that was very powerful, And for me as well, what I did without telling anyone was I signed up for Krav Maga classes. So this is the self-defense that they trained the Israeli army in. So I just went big. Like I wanted to go to the best and I needed to take my power back. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And so I remember going to the first couple classes and I didn't tell the instructor why I was there and what was going on. I think he knew there must be some kind of a story with this woman. He wasn't sure, but I was always showing up. I was on time and I was really into it. They do these drills at the end of the class where you're tired out and then you close your eyes and then your partner goes to attack you and you open your eyes and you suddenly have to figure out which moves because are they at the back, the side, the front? So the first 5 weeks, I just stood there frozen. I would open my eyes and my partner's going to attack and I like literally just stood there. And eventually, though, week 6, I started just clipping right in because, that's what they were trying to help me with so that I wouldn't go into fight or flight, or freeze. They were trying to help me so that I'd start moving. And it was just repetition and feeling really comfortable. And of course, eventually there was one class where I showed up and no one was there yet. So the instructor was very curious. And so I told him a bit of my story and he's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So he was really helpful then, really knowing how serious I was and wanting to learn this. And then, after, doing that for a few months, I signed up for boxing. Again, for me, it doesn't mean that everyone has to do this, but this was what I felt intuitively that my soul, my spirit, my heart needed to do so that I could pull back and stand in my power again. And it's not like I was taking it so that I could use it. I wasn't going to become a boxer. I don't want to compete or anything. It was just that I knew that learning these techniques was really good for me. So that really helped. That helped a lot.
I love how you talked about these things that you did that helped you. And I think what's important for people to understand is it could be anything that helps you get your power back, whether it is going to court and standing up for yourself, literally, or Krav Maga. We actually had an instructor on here a few weeks ago, amazing human being. So it's very cool to hear you talk about that. I box as well, so I get that. But what I really want people to hear is, you felt what you needed to do, what was going to make you better, or what was going to help you heal. So how long do you think, for me, it feels like an ongoing process, forever and ever, but what does the healing process look like for you, after experiencing what you did for those several months, but how dramatically it affected you, which is entirely natural? What was the healing process and timeline like?
Well, for me, the first couple months as I was preparing to go to court, I was living in terror. And meanwhile, I would, go and see different people that were healers. And I was being told, it's okay. You're safe, calm, and I just couldn't turn that engine off just yet. It was once I started entering into the courtrooms, then I honestly, I felt very powerful. I felt like, okay, we're going to do something here. So that helped to calm some of the worries and the fear down. And then there came a time where I was beating myself up. because I'm smarter than this. How could I not know him? Like, there was red flag. This one. I mean, why didn't I jump? And the thing is, we're human beings and we're getting these flags, but then we're like, well, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, or maybe I'm judging this wrong. So it's a bit of a slippery slope to go through. And so I think that's one of the passages that many of us will go through, is that we'll get into that place where we'll kind of beat ourselves up a little bit about it. And what I found most helpful was then speaking to someone who knew what I was talking about, someone who could see me, believe me, and hear me. Because the worst thing you can do at this point is, if you are, let's say it's narcissistic abuse that, you've been through. If you speak to someone and they're saying, oh yeah, those narcissists, they're crazy, huh? And like they don't really get what you're talking about. Like they don't know the depths. That's not going to be really great for your healing, So it's better to speak to someone if they know and they have that compassion. So if you're speaking to someone maybe who's a coach, a healer, a therapist, anyone who really knows, who can guide you through that, and so that you can talk through that, knowing that, wait a minute, you're a human being. And the thing is to know, like afterwards, would I go through this again? Not the same way. Not the same way. Now I know. I have this knowledge now.
I appreciate that you said a coach, a healer, a therapist, because I know some people have a thing against therapy. I think it's amazing. I think everybody should go to therapy at some point in their life, but it's not for everybody. So again, I love how you're talking about really finding what works for you. There is no cookie cutter treatment, healing plan, or process for us to go through when it comes to healing from trauma and healing from this type of abuse. So I'm so glad that you're talking through that so much about really focusing on yourself. So would you consider it now? Is it an ongoing struggle for you? Are you still healing? Or do you feel like, you know what, I have put this to bed and I'm good?
Well, that's interesting because healing, is layered. So at this point, I've done a lot of healing. I feel very powerful, very strong. The love, the worth that I have for myself is like tenfold higher than it ever was anyways, because that was what I was learning about. I really feel at this point that I feel quite solid. Now, the thing is, I won't be surprised if in a couple years from now, a memory pops up, something pops up, and maybe I'll have to do some healing around it, because we heal in layers. So have I gone to the depths of everything? I don't know. I've gone as deep as I can at this point, and I know I feel really great. And I know that I've, it's like checking out the different rooms, in the house of our body, right? Checking out and healing intellectually, healing in my heart, healing in my subconscious, doing all of that, working with shamans and, really, really doing what I could, and resting as well and reflecting and just living. So, I don't believe there's a timeline. I don't think anyone, if you've been through something, no one else has the right to say to you, like, hurry up. No. Each person, we listen to our own body, mind, soul, spirit, and we heal when we heal. We take our time. There's no rush, and we'll get to points. I feel like we get to points where we feel pretty good. And then, who knows? There might be more healing to do.
I completely agree with you. Would you say that you have forgiven this person and forgiven yourself?
That's interesting, especially as I crossed paths with them not that long ago, like in person, which I thought was, interesting. I feel like it was like a chess game, like the universe set it up. I was like, let's see what happens if she has to walk by. And I actually felt pretty good. I was kind of proud of myself. So for me, I have forgiven myself. That took a lot of work. That was the harder one. Like forgiveness for him, I still think I've got some nudge there, because to me, as an empath, as a kind heart, it's like, how could you ever treat someone that way? And now I understand when someone is like narcissistic, they have NPD, whether they've been diagnosed or not, they're a whole different ballgame, right? They don't have the emotions, the reflections, they don't operate how we do. But there's still a bit of that for me where I just think, like, unbelievable, in that sense. But for the most part, it happened. And it's, for me not to hang on to that and carry that in my life. I feel like, I'm worth more than that. And I love myself way more than that. So for me, that's like, there's maybe a smidge left of that, but for myself, and it was much harder to do this, was forgiving myself. Like I said, I blamed myself. I wanted to stay in that place of beating myself up, and I was responsible for it. But I was just a human being who didn't know, who now knows and can really help others and, share my story. And, if anything, I can look at it and say, maybe it's a bonus. Like in a weird way, it's a bonus. Like, because I'm someone that wants to help others through my story, maybe, it was just exactly what I needed. And I don't wish this on anyone. I don't want to go through it ever again, but I gained a lot from it. In my healing, that was big. I don't know if I would have gained as much just in my day-to-day life without that experience. Strange, right?
Well, it's just such an optimistic way to look at things, because I've talked to so many different people who have different viewpoints on that whole thing of, do I wish it would have happened? Would I be the same person? But I think, the way that you explained it is so healthy, and healthy for you to feel that way and to kind of say, okay, this happened. I wouldn't want it to happen again, but since it did, I'm going to use it for good, basically, and use it to help others. And speaking of helping others, let's say that there is somebody who is the Kathryn in the moment of, there's red flags. Okay, now he's yelling all the time. I'm in this situation. I don't like it, but I don't know what to do. What is your advice?
My advice is, this is a tough one, because if I'm speaking to someone, there's trauma bonding going on. So that's a tough one. My advice is that it's not going to get better. This is the truth. You are seeing the reality. Maya Angelou, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You don't need a second time. So this person going into rage or whatever they're doing, you don't need to see 10 performances from them. And, as humans with big hearts, sometimes we hang in thinking it's going to get better. If you are seeing and feeling these red flags, no, it's not going to get better. Reach out. If you feel scared, the big thing, I know I was mentioning this to you, Claudia, was I was embarrassed and didn't think that I could go to the police. I thought, who's this woman, with this, problem, like, I felt like silly. I felt silly. I felt embarrassed. And I thought it really wasn't as big. Maybe I'm making it bigger than it is. And what's interesting, from having many conversations with the detective who was working with me, and then talking to you and talking to other people, I realized, what the message I hear now is, this is what we're here for. If you're scared and there's something going on, don't be afraid to call us, because perhaps this will save your life or save someone's life. Don't ever second guess that. Just make the call. Worst case scenario, if it wasn't anything, so what? So you made a phone call. I mean, you have a right. You deserve help if you need it.
Thank you for pointing that out and for bringing that up. And also, excuse me, for talking about the fact that you were embarrassed and ashamed and felt like, well, do I really need to call the police? Like, is my problem really this serious? I don't want to bother them. So thank you for talking about going through that. And you would now do it differently, I presume, now that you know you would pick up that phone much sooner than you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I first tried to break off with him, and I knew then, even with my friends trying to help me, I knew intuitively inside of me, I thought, I'm in trouble now, and my friends can't help me. I didn't say anything to them. I just pretended everything was okay at that point because I knew they couldn't help me. I'm kind of embarrassed at this point. I don't know what to do. It took a few more months, and it's interesting to note in my story too, the same woman who's a very dear friend who said, "Oh, he's just jealous. That's what's going on," was the one who found me and brought me to the detective. So it's a full circle,
right?
When it was like, and it was also me not sharing for a few months there. I mean, I think a lot of my friends noticed I got pretty quiet, and I was just trying to figure it out by myself, which is no. There wasn't an answer by myself. I needed help. It was just a simple answer: get help.
And that's okay. It's okay to get help.
More than okay. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's the best.
It really is. Tell me, relationship advice. If you just are going to throw out your best piece of general relationship advice for everybody watching and listening, throw it on us.
All right. For me, because of what I've lived in my life, what I really believe is when you meet someone, we have these rose-colored glasses and we start believing things about the person that we've made up, fictional things. Like they haven't even said it, but we start, putting these things on, crowns on them, and they're so great. That's not real. Pull it right back, slow down, slowly get to build a friendship with this person, get to know them. Take your time. You want to really get to know someone. There's no rush. And I think as human beings, I know for myself and for many people that I know, we didn't take relationship 101 in school. Unfortunately, missed that. They weren't offering it, missed it. And I feel it is hugely important.
I really agree with you. Yeah, if they gave that in my school, I apparently was not there that day. And it's interesting that you even bring that up because it's not something that we really think about. We do all this other training for jobs and this, that, and the other, but we don't ever really focus on the place where potentially we're spending the majority of our life, which is with another human being or human beings. So maybe we need to work on that, Kathryn. Maybe we need to get that in schools. Well, where can people find you? You do coaching, you're an author. I was tired just hearing everything. But if people want to find you, where can they do that?
Well, first you can find me on my website. So www.kathrynmalek.com. Very simple. Just spell it the same way you see it on the screen. Then if you want to venture into my Facebook group, Empaths, it's called Empath Soul Mastery. So if you were to search on Facebook for Empath Soul Mastery, join us. Come into the Facebook group. If you feel that you're a highly sensitive person, you're an empath, you want to learn more, come on in. And last, the story that I shared about narcissistic abuse. If you want to read the full story, it's called The Untethered Woman, and it's on Amazon. The Untethered Woman. It's a compilation novel of different women's stories of, going to the end of destruction almost, hitting some really hard things in life, but really rising up from that. So The Untethered Woman.
Kathryn, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story and sharing your struggles and your triumphs and how you made it through. I think it's going to be so meaningful for the people that are watching and listening. I really, really appreciate you and appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm so glad that Kathryn was able to share her story with us today and really impress upon us that forgiving yourself really can be the most difficult part of living in an abusive relationship, but it's absolutely the most worthwhile. So until next week, please remember, you are strong enough and you are worth it. Thank you for listening to the Strong Enough podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform by searching Strong Enough. And on YouTube, we're available on the Spear Talk channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Strong Enough Pod. If you have suggestions for an upcoming episode or a future guest, please reach out at strongenoughpod@gmail.com. Remember, you are worth it.